Welcome to the Business Owners Counsel, Legal Issues from Growth to Exit.
Welcome to the Business Owners Counsel, From Growth to Exit with Kevin Brick. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host. This is the show where Florida business owners get practical, plain English legal strategies for building stronger companies, from avoiding costly disputes to scaling smart, to maximizing your business's value at exit. In each episode, we'll sit down with Kevin Brick, founder of Brick Business Law, to talk through the exact playbooks his firm uses to help businesses thrive. Kevin and his team have guided Florida companies through litigation, transactions, employment issues, and growth challenges of every kind. Whether you're growing fast, facing a tough decision, or preparing for the sale of your company, this podcast will give you the tools and insights you need to move forward with confidence. Welcome, Kevin. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Lisa. Good to be with you.
Kevin, what is exit planning and what do most people get wrong with it?
Yeah, well, at the basic level, it's just the process of getting a business prepared for a sale or a transition. So usually that involves a couple of key things: reducing risks, increasing the value and the transferability so you can improve the likelihood of a sale. So ultimately, most owners, they want to sell at the highest possible price, and this is the process that works on just getting them there.
And why is it such a big issue right now?
Well, you might have heard of what they call the silver tsunami, right? Which is all these business owners who are older and have run their businesses for a long time are becoming interested in selling. And so, if you look at data from the Exit Planning Institute, they actually see about 3 out of 4 owners of businesses would like to sell in the next 10 years. And then, actually, within the next 5 years, half of current business owners want to sell their businesses. And so, uh, the the problem that they see, though, is that only 20 to 30% of businesses that go to market actually do sell. So that's why there is this interest right now in exit planning, because there's just a big gap between the intention to sell and being actually ready to sell successfully.
And then why do most businesses fail to sell?
There's a couple of reasons. So a lot of businesses are very dependent on the owner being there and running things, and so the idea of taking the owner out of the business creates a problem, for a sale. There's legal and structural issues, poor documentation, things that come up in due diligence causes businesses not to sell. And then actually, there's a lot of businesses that they sell sort of in a fire sale mentality because the owner goes through some unexpected transition, death, divorce, health issues, and so it causes them to have to sell the business. And the state of most businesses is that they're really not sellable. They're just not prepared to sell, and very few take the time and the effort to actually get them ready to go to market, rather than just having to go to market or just doing it without really planning for it.
Kevin, can you share with us what are the core pillars of exit planning?
Yes. So value creation is one of them. Taking the business from the value that it's at today, and to the value that it should be at when you want to sell. And then I talked a little bit about risk reduction. So taking things within the business regarding how it operates or its contracts or different parts of it, and reducing risks there. And then the other piece I talked about a little bit was transferability, which basically means putting things into play within the business that makes it able to be transferred to a new owner. So the big, so there's those are the business pillars, and then on the personal side, we talk a lot about owner readiness, meaning that owner has to be ready financially, and they have to be ready for what they want to do in life afterwards. Which sounds like it's not a big thing, but it really does become a big issue if owners aren't really preparing for life after a sale. And so that's one of the big things we try to do, is touch on the business pillars as well as the personal and financial.
And then what are some basic things you explain to people when they're considering whether exit planning is right for them?
One big piece of it is that it's a multi-year process. It's not just uh, one transaction or one assessment. So people need to plan to decide to sell it into the future. So the process usually, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, and so we're looking at building towards that value. So it's not just a one-time thing or a short-term thing, but it's generally a multi-year process. And it's all about getting to options for the owner. So a lot of times owners, maybe they're not really just trying to maximize the value. Maybe they're trying to transfer it to a family member, and they want to do that successfully, or they care about the legacy of the business, transferring it to the right people who will continue to run it the way they want to. So we have to make sure that we're tailoring the outcomes and the process to what that person wants. So that's when we talk about an exit planning process, it really is figuring out what's right for them, figuring out what we need to do in the business to get it there, and then having that sort of complex process of moving the business towards where it needs to be and where they want it to be at the end of the when they actually get to the sale.
Let's define a term for me. What is transferability and why does it matter?
Well, so generally to make a basic assessment of transferability, which means how easily would the business transfer from the current owner to the next one, we ask them, if you were gone from the business for 1 month, what would happen? And a lot of times business owners say, "Oh, we wouldn't make it a day or a week." So if the business would fall apart when the owner's gone, it's not very transferable. It's highly dependent on the operator or the owner being there. So we'd like to see that if an owner would walk away, if they would step out of the business, the revenue is going to stay, the people are going to stay, the systems are going to keep working, and a lot of that does have to do with legal issues, like making sure we have good contracts in place and procedures, employment agreements, all those things that would need to help keep that business structure rolling without the owner there.
Kevin, what are the biggest misconceptions about exit planning?
A lot of people that decide not to plan for the exit, they have some typical excuses. They say, well, when I'm ready to sell, that's when I'll deal with it. Or they say everything's fine, or they deflect it and say, well, it's my CPA's job or other people. But really, those are the things that people say who don't sell well. So, and the thing that we hate to see is that somebody doesn't really prepare for it. And then that difficulty does show up. We talked about death, divorce, health issues, and then they have to do a fire sale or they just have to walk away from it and lose all that value of their business. So those are the misconceptions, is that somebody else will deal with it or you can deal with it later. It really, the proactive owner is the one who does the best in this situation.
So, beyond misconceptions, I'm sure that there are some mistakes. What are the biggest mistakes owners make early?
Well, a lot of times when we look under the hood of a business, we see that they might have no contracts in place. They might have inconsistent contracts. They might not have employment protections or intellectual property ownership, clarity around that. A lot of them might have very sloppy ownership records, or they ignore compliance issues. And those things can really build up. And it feels like maybe they don't matter until you get to a buyer who does their due diligence and decides not to go forward with a transaction because of all of those kind of mistakes that they're making without addressing them.
And I would imagine that these issues get worse over time if they're not addressed. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Right. Well, businesses over time, if they grow or they add people, they do different things. The complexity of growth also adds to risks, and sometimes those risks become very embedded in the business, in the operations, with people who kind of do things the way that they've been taught, even though they've been taught to do things in a way that's wrong or not according to best practices. And then, as I mentioned before, those things they start to surface under due diligence pressure or interviews or different things when they come out. They end up coming out at sort of the worst time when there's an interested buyer and they end up getting scared away or that causes the value of the business to go down prior to a transaction.
We shared some of the tough stuff, but there has to be some benefit. What are the biggest benefits of early exit planning?
Well, those who engage in the process, they often see a higher valuation of their business. And that's because things have been put in place to make the business more valuable. It runs better. It's got more protections in place. And so those things sort of add upon themselves. You see better deal terms, more options for selling, less stress in the sale process. And then generally you can see that they are able to get to a sales structure that actually fits what they wanted to do at the outset. So whether it's the value, whether it's the timing, whether it's the terms, those things can all kind of come into line if they've really planned well and executed on the steps that have been set out in the exit planning process.
Boy, sitting on the sidelines as a bystander, I'm kind of curious. Why does it look like this whole event is a team sport and exit planning needs a lot of people involved in that?
It is. So what you see with a typical owner that doesn't engage in an exit planning process, they end up being sort of that person in the middle that has to coordinate between a lawyer, a CPA, their financial advisor, growth strategists, all these different people that are trying to help their business, and that becomes very difficult for an owner to be running a business and also be directing a team of advisors to execute on strategies and do those things. So really, you want to have all these people working together, rowing in the same direction, and not just relying on one advisor looking at things from one point of view.
I can see how advisors might play solo sports. They might be individuals, have their own way of doing things. What happens when your advisors are not aligned?
Well, if there's poor communication between them, or they don't have a congruent strategy, then a lot of times those they're executing on things that are competing with each other. They might not be aligned. There's risks that can be missed. There's just inefficiencies, failed outcomes, and obviously, if you have a bunch of advisors who are running in different directions, that can be expensive. And sometimes, if they make mistakes or do things that don't align well, they really can't be fixed. And so, if you have disorganized advisors, you're going to end up with a poorer outcome. You really need to have everybody on the same page.
Let's talk about their roles. What does a strong exit planning team really look like?
Well, the exit planning process itself involves a coordinator who in that nomenclature is called the quarterback. So the quarterback is leading this team, leading a team of an attorney or attorneys, a CPA, a financial advisor, or maybe an M&A advisor. And so each of those people within their own lane is doing the piece of the plan that they need to do as coordinated by the quarterback. And so that when we talk about exit planning, we're talking about all of these advisors coming into an alignment for a strategy to move towards a particular outcome.
And Kevin, why does the legal position sit at the center of this process?
It often does. It's an important piece of it. So it touches a lot of the aspects of risk, as you can imagine. So you're thinking of the ownership piece, the structure, employment issues or operations, and then putting contracts in place or doing different things to protect the process, the going concern of the business. That's the enterprise value. The legal piece of it protects a lot of those things. It helps in the de-risking process. And so that is part of what actually determines the readiness for sale, is making sure that all the legal documents are arranged in a way that helps the business really have that protectable value.
And all of that makes sense to me, but how does this impact the owner personally?
Well, and if you picture the typical business owner, usually they have been investing in their business for years. They've been working in it for years, and a lot of their net worth is tied up in a business. And so if they're not able to sell or sell at a maximized value, then really they've lost a lot of the value of their life's work. So at a personal standpoint, they need to be able to take that value at the end of their career and transfer it from the business into their investment account, their retirement accounts. So that planning for that transaction, the way it affects them personally is really, are they going to be able to live that life that they want to after the sale of their business? And so that's a really, really important thing. It ties in a lot to the life of the business owner after they sell.
And Kevin, we know the long journey starts with the first step. So, what is the first step in exit planning?
It's an assessment process. So really, it's about understanding the current value of the business and what is going to be needed to transition it, identifying the risks, and then the gap between where we are right now and where we want to be in terms of value. It's about building a coordinated plan to get there. And so, if you take a business that maybe it's at 70% of the value it could be if you put certain things in place and you're able to increase revenue and profitability. And then you go from maybe an average type of business within that industry to making it a best in class business in that industry, and it can sell at an increased multiple at a higher revenue. That's where we really start seeing, all right, we've taken the assessment, we've executed on things, and now we're looking at real tangible outcomes.
How would you describe the ultimate goal here?
Three main things. Number one, getting the maximum value, which that can mean different things to different people. Number two is maximizing the options. so that owners who are selling have choices at the time that they're ready to sell. And number three, just to reduce the surprises in the process, that you want the sale process to go very smoothly. So high value, lots of options, and minimum surprises.
Kevin, this has been great insights, and you've shined a lot of light on the different aspects of this. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Lisa.
Folks, Florida business is facing a challenge or an opportunity, whether it's a dispute, a transaction, or preparing for growth or exit. Visit brickbusinesslaw.com to connect with Kevin and his team. Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and remember, the right legal strategies aren't just protection, they're a pathway to success. Come on back next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.